If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
And we are back. I'm Chris. I'm the CEO of Survival Dispatch, joined tonight by my good friends Jeff, MD, 26-year CIA case manager, case officer, I should say. Randy Nance, combat wounded Green Beret. They're backstage right now. I've got a quick message from one of our sponsors to share with y'all. Then we'll get into it. By the way, I'm not sure if Khalid will be able to join us or not tonight. If you've been following things lately, if you're in our Guardian Signal chat, you'll know that there have been multiple attempts on his life over the course of the past couple weeks. Things are pretty tenuous over there right now. So you're going to see him, not see him, see him, not see him, based on all that crap that's going on. So tonight, I want to just give you another heads up on this company called Vizsla, V-I-Z-L-A. So Vizsla found this silver vein. And as you probably noticed, silver has absolutely skyrocketed. And they turned it into a multi-billion-dollar project. So then they went on the hunt for the next, call it precious metal. And the copper market for years now has slowly been increasing in price, slowly decreasing in availability. And at the end of the day, none of our electronics, our power grids, and everything in between can function without copper. And Jeff MD, as he mentioned, he's an engineer. There's only copper and I think it was gold, he said, are the two most conductive substances, minerals, whatever you want to call it. And obviously we're not going to be making a bunch of wire out of gold, but it's not just wire, of course. It's things like the little ICs in the motherboards of every electronic component. Those are called interconnects. They're the size of your hair. If you've ever seen a motherboard, you have to absolutely have copper. Like there's just no way around it. And in the big picture, it's grid, it's comms, and it's every electrical system that you have in your home, work, or vehicle. So you can kind of see where this is going. Now, there's some interesting content that Vizsla put out there. They bought this project, this Palmer VMS project, and it's already been endorsed and backed by the federal government as well as the Canadian government. And in my experience, because I've sold a lot of stuff into government over the years, when the government says, hey, we're behind this, we're going to lessen off all the regulations as far as, environmental stuff, so on and so forth, that's essentially a big, not red flag, but call it like a gold flag, a money flag, that it's going to be extremely successful. So bottom line is, at the end of the day, these guys that turned that silver project, Vizsla Silver, into a huge home run for investors are now doing this Palmer one. And as you can see right there, it's in that bottom corner of Alaska, and it looks like it cuts into Canada. Somebody refresh my memory. I think this is called the Yukon in Canada, but I could be wrong about that. Either way, these guys are pretty significant player. There's significant opportunity for all of us. If you have money tied up, 401ks, IRAs, I've talked about moving that into gold in the past, and take my word for it. I'm not an expert at finances, but I know a winner when I see it. And this is a winning company to invest in. If you check the video's description down below, there'll be links specifically to a page on their website that says Survival Dispatch. And you can check out buying it either on the Canadian or American stock exchanges. So at the end of the day, this is a great way to be prepared for your financial future and especially your retirement future if the whole world doesn't come undone before that point in time. Basically, let's knock on wood and hope that doesn't happen. So joining me now, Jeff MD beside me. As I mentioned, he's our in-house 007. Below us, my good friend Randy Nance, combat wounded vet, and Agent 711, Khalid Muhammad from Command 11. Probably won't be joining us tonight, but he did say he would do his best to try. One further note on Khalid, by the way, he has been moving from location to location to location upwards of 4 times a day. 3 of his 4 original safe houses were hit by TTP, so the Pakistani Taliban, and there were deaths involved in those firefights. BFE, for those of you who know what that means. But his situation is very, very, very tenuous. So say a prayer for Khalid Muhammad if you have a minute, and hopefully we'll see him tomorrow night for sure. So before we get into the main topic tonight, which is China and the threat that China poses to us, specifically joining themselves at the hip to multiple different terrorist organizations, we have the conflicted question of the night. So let me get it up here on screen. If you're not familiar with this, conflictofthegame.com, these are 14 card decks with questions set in post-apocalyptic scenarios. 99% of them have some element of morality to them, hence the name Conflict. And I'm going to read this off. We'd love to see your answers in the live chat or the description down below. We will give you our answers at the end of the podcast. The government's backup plan was blindsided with destruction, and reserve supplies were compromised. Your country was never a net producer of goods, and now your fiat currency is worthless. If you were the president in this situation, how would you get other countries to cooperate with you? Well, I think that's easy to answer as an American. And oops, I just noticed I didn't have Jeff and Randy on stage. Apologies for that. It's been a pretty crazy, I don't know, 3 years of working 16, 17 hours a day, 7 days a week. Anyway, I think the answer is pretty obvious for us in America. As long as we have our weapons stockpile up, we just flex a bit and we solve the problem. So we'll try to think of this in the context of a country that does not have the military might that we do. So with that being said, I didn't have this in the brief, guys, but I want to cover this, and I want to hear both you weigh in on this. New Al-Shabaab training camp revealed in South Somalia as militants roam free under Mogadishu's watch. A shocking new video circulating online appears to show Al-Shabaab militants running a full-scale training camp somewhere in South Somalia, raising fresh alarm over the extremist group's growing freedom of movement. Security insiders say this is the latest proof that the UN-backed administration in Villa, Somalia, has allowed terrorist factions to flourish as long as they keep their violence away from Mogadishu. Critics argue the capital's rulers are turning a blind eye to militant expansion while focusing on political theatrics and foreign lobbying. For years, governments in the region have been accused of ignoring extremist mobility, enabling Al-Qaeda-linked fighters to regroup, recruit, and strengthen their networks. Now, with disturbing new images of armed militants training in broad daylight, the fear is that South Somalia once again is sliding into a terror sanctuary. Kind of an ironic thing here, but this hat, it doesn't, the C doesn't stand for Chris. I tell people it does, but it doesn't stand for Chris. It stands for Compliant Technology, who's our good friend Jeff Nicholas, who was a CW4 Chief Warrant Officer and 160 Night Stalker pilot, Randy's best friends, right? The guys who go in at night and retrieve our spec ops guys, special forces, I should say, like Randy. And he was, by the way, he served in Mogadishu, which is why I mentioned that. This is 1 minute and 27 seconds. I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm not going to scroll further down because there's a kind of a giveaway that I don't want to mention until you two have a chance to weigh in. But this is the gist of this video. That's basically the gist of it. I don't need to play the rest. It's a propaganda video more so than anything else. So let me get the boys up here on our main screen. Jeff, I'm going to come to you first. Be honest, what's your first thought when you see those jihadis marching through the desert in this propaganda video?
It's Minnesota welfare money at work.
Okay, good answer. I'm coming back to you. Randy, your first thought when you see these guys?
Well, you know, as I mentioned before, when you see those flags and them, you know, whether they're in vehicles, I did see some people marching during the initial invasion, but that was the only time. But otherwise, when that stuff started up in the outer lying areas all around Baghdad, that was a call to action for those folks. That was them signaling, this is who we are. This is our territory. We own this place.
I'm going to show you what comes to mind for me. Then I'll come back to you first, Randy, and then we'll come back to you, Jeff. This is the first thing comes to mind for me. Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
A10 Warthog. Screw you.
Won't take very many of those.
Yeah, I mean, we could wipe out every last one of those guys. I think the cyclic rate is somewhere around, 3,500 rounds per minute or something like that of an A10. But good luck surviving that, guys.
Yeah, for those that have not got to see that thing actually fire, certainly in real life, that the cannon on the front of the thing is so powerful. The plane has to go into a dive, right? It goes into a dive, an attack dive, and you'll see it. You'll hear, of course, everybody knows it has the Warthog sound. It's very loud. It's very short, just like that. But I don't know. That's a couple thousand rounds at least. But you will see when that cannon fires up, you see all the smoke, a little bit of flame and a bunch of smoke coming out of it, but the plane slows down. And that's why they can't keep on the trigger, because if they did, it would stall the plane out of the air.
Holy
so
shit.
And then as soon as they let off, it'll slow down when they're firing. And then when they let off, it looks like they hit the turbo, because then it'll speed up again.
I did not know that. That's fascinating, Randy.
Yeah, that's how the A10 works. And so, yeah, we've used it plenty of times over there on crowds such as that. To me, this just speaks to those that are in charge, right, that we've talked about many times, that no one's doing anything about. They want to use the jihadists, it's clear now, to advance their objectives, which would be the New World Order. And that is why no one, well, first of all, I always said, heck, if you really wanted to do some stuff in training, go to Africa, because nobody cares what you're doing there or what happens. You go do that all you want. Now, I'm glad somebody has drawn in on this in Somalia, because that's a serious deal. But if they're training in Afghanistan, why wouldn't they train there in Somalia or in Africa, where they have plenty of land? And now, as Jeff mentioned, plenty of our taxpayer dollars to fund it.
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate that very, very much, Randy. For the people who are just joining us for the first time, we're covering the SITREP, so situation report. We've got 4 or 5 items like this one in Somalia. Then we'll be into the main topic of China. Jeff, is the purpose of this video more so recruiting than anything else?
Yeah, I think so. When you see guys marching around with flags, they're not marching into combat like that. I mean, this isn't, the old days where
Whoa, time out. Are you saying that when 9/11 2.0 comes, they're not going to be carrying ISIS flags so we can identify them?
No, and they probably won't be marching in a straight line either. I mean, this is
or
sort
in formation.
Or in formation. Yeah, this is like the old French fighting in squares on the big battlefield. Yeah, we haven't done that in a few hundred years, and for good reason.
The Iraqis did once, right outside Karbala during the initial invasion. And when their first force came out, yes, it was the saddest thing I ever saw in life, because, everybody stopped for a couple of seconds, probably thinking the same thing. I was like, is this for real?
Yeah, because
they didn't last long. We'll just put it that way.
They did that right up until World War I, when they would send guys over the top in the trenches, and they would just go into the teeth of machine guns and get slaughtered. But the British and the French generals were so freaking stupid. They kept doing it over and over and over again. That should have been a lesson they learned about the first 15 seconds.
You would think so. That's about all this lasted. Now, they were with tanks, so they were marching troops with some they were Russian tanks.
T-62s.
Yeah, they were 272s, but they were pieces of junk, really, is all it is.
Right on. So the next one up is anybody shocked by this headline this morning? It includes Trump would be assassinated.
Oh, of course it is.
Of course it is.
Of course, that's why at the time they said he had no social media presence. Now they're saying he had a huge social media.
So now people can ask them questions, right? Because apparently the active investigation is over. Is that what we're saying here?
Gets actually kind of crazy down at the bottom here, where it basically says, we have reviewed this case over and over, looked into every nugget. We've spoken to the families, the president. There's no cover up here. There's no motive for it. There's no reason for it, Bongino stated. Now the case is in pending inactive status, and we're willing to look at credible leads at this point in time.
So they're going to still use the same. Yeah, we can't really comment on an active investigation, even if it's stalled for the moment.
But hold on a second. Am I the only one who's looking at this going, now the case is pending and active? We've announced that there's nothing there. It's a nothing burger. Kid had foreign bank accounts, multiple phones. But now we will look into credible leads.
Yeah.
But we haven't looked into credible leads up to this point, but now we'll look into credible.
Kind of does sound that way, doesn't it? Now that you mentioned it.
It
Well,
just doesn't jive.
Well, also you got to look at who was in charge of the government when that happened. Well, it was the Biden administration.
Yeah.
So they had plenty of time to cover up and shred and burn whatever they wanted to.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, well said, Jeff.
Well, the fact that the FBI was seen rinsing off the roof that very day, you never see that. That's
no.
Dude, the fact that the FBI was seen rinsing off a 312 pitch roof, which is dang near a flat roof, 24 hours after they said, well, wait a minute, that's a slope roof.
Yeah.
We can't put people up there. It's too dangerous.
I'm not even sure it was 24 hours.
That's why you didn't see Secret Service up there rinsing it off, because it was too steep.
That's right.
Right.
They're union, man. They've got work rules.
For those people not familiar with construction terminology, what that means is you have 3 inches of rise for every 12 inches of run. Anything below 412 is considered a low slope roof. Most homes, 6, 7, 12 pitch. All righty. Next one up. Women under Sharia. Do you really want this culture in your country? 49 seconds.
Just so bad.
So he basically locks her in there, gives her a tongue lash, and then he lets her back out again. And of course, you can see she's still all tied up and everything. And now she ends the video on her knees doing I don't know what, but definitely not compatible with Western civilization.
No, any
Jeff,
civilization.
What do you, yeah. Well said. Yeah, the word civil doesn't go with it, right? What do you make of the Abbott government announcing that there are 2 Sharia courts that they know of in Texas? Do you think it's only 2, or is it more and that's all they know of?
Yeah, there may be more, but again, it's not for criminal stuff. It's probably for business stuff. And it's just that, to me, that doesn't bother me. That's no different than they have rabbinical courts in New York to handle disputes between Jewish people. If they decide that's how they want to settle their business affairs, that's up to them. I don't care.
I don't care.
If they handle civil stuff or criminal stuff, it's different.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the point from Abbott's office. Randy, you're ground zero with this shit in Texas.
Well, like always, we know if they found 2, there has to be more. That's just all they found. But, Jeff's probably right. It's probably just some stuff like that. But, somebody needs to make sure also. But then we also have to dive a little deeper, okay? Because they don't believe if he beats his wife or he ties her up or whatever he does to her is not criminal.
True.
So those won't ever make it there because they're not going to be charged anyway. As I just saw, certainly after the Christian march out there at Dearborn, the X blew up for 24, 48 hours about that stuff. And I can't believe how many posts I saw. And some were even women, stupid, like saying, in Islam, men and women are all that's the only place that men and women are equals. I'm like,
bullshit.
What a joke that is.
Yeah.
It would be hilarious if it wasn't so true. But I mean, it wasn't so false because there is no doubt about it. I even watched another one that said, the guy saying, I don't know why American men don't want this. You can have 4 wives and everything you say goes. You have complete control. And that's exactly the way they see it.
Yeah, and Trouble Actual nails it here. I say let some women experience Sharia, then we American men won't look so bad like they make us out
at all whatsoever.
Definitely the white girls, middle-aged and down, hooked on SSRIs. So this is an interesting post on Newsmax here. I want to say that Shannon G sent this one, if memory serves me correct. Hamas mined Israeli soldiers' social media for intel ahead of October 7th. And the topic just essentially reinforces, or the body of the work, I should say, just reinforces that title up top. I want to make a point about this quickly, and then I'll come right back to you, Randy, is that with tonight's main topic being China, and I've said this many times before, China wants to weaken us to the point that they're the superpower, but not so much that they can't live off of our massive economy, because without our economy, we know that they'll circle the drain. But if it ever did come to a Red Dawn situation, I don't know if a lot of people realize how pervasive the Chinese have gotten into America, right? So they've got access to tons of social media networks. They've been gathering databases right down to the home address. If you have a Roomba, they have the floor plan for your home attached to your name, attached to your activities, attached to your employer, attached to your families, attached to whether or not you're a registered Republican or Democrat, and the list goes on and on and on. It is deeply, deeply pervasive, and this is going to be one of the threads that I hammer on tonight. When you take a superpower with that type of information on America and then getting into bed with the jihadi terrorists and the cartels and the gangs, that's bad. I mean, look, let me come to you first, Randy. As a Green Beret, when you guys were fixing to, go on a mission or to seize a particular point geographically, how much prep work did you guys do? How much intel did you go over before you actually did the thing?
Well, I can't really even talk about that really, but honestly, a ton.
Lots.
You know what I'm saying? It's a lot. And then each MOS has its own part of the plan, and then of course, the biggest part is all the intelligence, all the, the sources. Again, at this point, it was either 2 or 3 independent sources, different groups, couldn't be from the same group or the same family. You had to have independent sources. And then we had to have everything that they were accused of doing, right? In multiple areas. And I said, there's a lot of intelligence on the online or through the whole system. So it wasn't just our intelligence that we gathered. We used some from other teams. We used some from the tier 1 elements and other intelligence agencies, because everybody's on the same network. And, you're the guy on our intelligence guys on that network. So we just, rolled out, but it's a ton of work. I can tell you some packages, paperwork, they were about this thick.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. So just quick divergence from the script here, or the brief, just because I see him in the audience. I want to personally thank Father Duck. I'm not going to mention what his real name is, but he's an awesome member of our community. And when Randy was an Echo in his team, when he was a Green Beret, so that's a comms expert. And Randy mentioned online, he's got a cell phone. He's got the POC-Link radios. Father Duck went out of his way to send Randy a brand new Yaesu, which is a very high-end Japanese mobile radio. So UHF, VHF. Randy paid a huge price. So for those of you who don't know, he was hit with an IED that literally took his ass off, torched him from the waist down, destroyed one of his legs, had to be amputated. People like Father Duck, we need more people like this, not because he gave Randy something, because of the thoughtfulness of the whole thing. So thank you, Father Duck. And I don't know if you want to say anything now or not, Randy. You don't have to, but it's your call.
No, I really appreciate it, man. The think that somebody would do something for me like that, I really appreciate. You know what I mean? It's not every day. People don't just do this. You know what I mean? And again, we just mentioned it online, and then, what I really like is he saw a gap and a need that he could fill, and he did it. He didn't ask it, he didn't ask for anything, he said, which they arrived this morning. Heck, they were here before 10 o'clock this morning, right about when I texted you. It was here early.
And he sent them on Saturday. I mean, so he clearly paid for fast service.
Yeah. And so, I'm a little bit speechless about it, for you and him both, but, I really appreciate it. And I can't wait to get this thing up and running.
Right on. So just before we move on, I just want to briefly say that this is the power of the community that you guys have built, not us. We just provided the playing field. You guys are the ones who, put 12,000 messages a week through the Guardians channel, not including the other 5 channels. But there are some very, very good Americans out there still. And things like this restore my faith in humanity. I'll leave it at that. So getting back on topic, Jeff, this whole thing of Hamas mining Israeli soldiers' social media, I'm assuming that there's really nothing in place to prevent our soldiers or law enforcement from doing the same thing and putting, unclassified information out there and then making themselves even more vulnerable.
Yeah, they do it all the time. Sadly,
Wow.
when I was in the agency, we were strongly encouraged not to have any social media at all. I never had Facebook. I still don't have Instagram, anything like that. The first quote unquote social media I ever got was LinkedIn, and that was when I was retiring. They say, yeah, if you're going to do, look for work after you retire, helps to have a LinkedIn page, but you're limited to what you put on it. It was, my wife never had Facebook while I worked at the agency. My daughter had to get one because her school would push work assignments and things like that through it.
Okay.
But we didn't put her last name on it. We did took all these precautions. But we just didn't, because if you don't have it, it can't bite you in the ass.
Yeah. Good. Very good point. Thanks, Jeff.
But just one other quick thing, though.
Yeah.
The Ukrainians have been doing this, and they were using Russians' social media to find out where they were and then target them with drones and stuff. Because they would say, oh, here I am. And they'd have a picture and all this. And the Ukrainians would, okay, I know exactly where that is. And then they'd put artillery on them.
So actually, I appreciate you mentioning that, because I want to go back in time ever so briefly to the spring, just by fluke, just as the particular time of day. Randy was actually the first person that I've seen on social media break Sarah Adams' intelligence when he got a warning. Was it SOCOM or CENTCOM that sent you the warning, Randy?
Well, I got it through the SOCOM channels, but I think it came through use of FIC.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So basically, we're on air, and Randy was getting ready to speak on whatever the topic was, and then he said, hey, check this out, what I just got. I just got a warning that those of us who are GWAT veterans are being targeted by the jihadis in 9/11 2.0. And then shortly after that, everybody was talking about it. It was just kind of interesting timing that Randy would break it being a Green Beret. And so the intel basically went from Sarah Adams to the DOW. Then they sent it out to people like Randy who are in particular danger, because anybody who was spec ops and anybody who was an officer in particular, but all GWAT vets are being targeted because they want our vets to feel the way that they felt when we went after them in their home countries. They want us to feel that here. So very large concentration, not surprisingly, of GWAT vets in Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania ranks very high on the radar for 9/11 2.0, specifically because of the retribution piece against our brave soldiers like Randy. So moving on to the next one, we've talked a lot over the past few years with regards to drones as well. I think we're actually the first ones who broke the intel 3 years ago on drones being used to drop things like aerosolized fentanyl into football stadiums. We got mocked for less than a week, and then all kinds of supporting stuff was made public. But check this out. Dragonfire laser shoots down high-speed drones traveling at 400 miles per hour, cost $13 per shot. UK Navy to begin deploying system on destroyers. Ministry of Defense confirms the laser achieved live kills at its Hebrides range and will be fitted on a Type 45 destroyer from 2027 on. Very interesting technology, non-kinetic. Jeff, I'm going to come to you first, because I got a question for you, and I'm not going to mention his name, good friend of mine, but he's a private individual. He said, if you study the information on the lasers that the military is using, they will say that, we can shoot a target X amount of miles away. And he asks, okay, so if it's that far away and the curvature of the earth comes into play, do they bend the laser? And when he's asked people at a high level, they're like, yeah, you can't do that. You can reflect it, but you can't bend it, sort of thing. And so his question is you're on mute, Jeff, but with the curvature of the earth, how do you shoot a laser 100 miles away or 200 miles away and it not go off into the atmosphere as opposed to maintaining trajectory?
Well, there's a couple things. First, you can bend light, but you need a black hole to do it, or a sun. But yeah, as long as it's line of sight, and if the drone is so many feet in the air and you're down below, the curvature of the Earth is an issue, but at long ranges. If it's within 2 or 3, and if you can see something, you can shoot it.
So
what it
point,
boils
Jeff,
down to.
Yeah, his point was that it was beyond LOS. It was beyond line of sight.
It doesn't matter as long as it's just point A, point B. If there's not a mountain in between it or the curvature of the Earth, you can hit it.
But that's what he was getting at. The
But the drones are going to be higher, and
Well, no,
when they're going to.
He wasn't drone specific. He was saying that the Navy says that they have lasers on some destroyers that can take out enemy boats at such and such a distance, like 100, 200 miles. That doesn't jive with the curvature of the Earth.
That one's kind of pushing it, I think.
Okay.
Unless it could be an airborne laser system too, though.
Or they have a big mirror on a satellite. I don't know. But
you have a.
Could you actually do that, Jeff? Could you bounce a laser off us? Not that I'm challenging Randy. I'm curious. Could you bounce it off something reflecting from low orbit satellites?
Physically, it's possible. It's not likely, because what disrupts a laser beam more than anything is the atmosphere.
Okay.
If you're in an area that's got a lot of humidity, smog, clouds, things like that, lasers are optimal in a dry, clear environment, because anything in the air can degrade the laser.
Okay.
That's why you shoot them in space. They hit different layers. They work great in space because there's nothing for them to be disrupted by. But the lower you are, the denser the atmosphere, the more impact you have.
Okay, appreciate that. I knew you'd have a good answer. Randy, what are your thoughts on the UK announcing this? My feeling is that if the UK is announcing this, we've probably had this for 10 or 20 years or something to that effect.
Yeah, I would imagine so. We've been working with lasers for quite some time, and I know I saw the video, and this is completely different, unrelated a little bit, but it was something 9 or 10 years ago on NBC, when the Asian guy that's the astrophysicist that's kind of famous, y'all have seen him. I don't remember his name, but everybody's seen him. And he was on there telling them that we had a 1 trillion watt laser that we would fire into clouds to help them seed and clouds and do some other stuff. And then the funny thing you brought that up today is because I think my dad sent something of this thing called a laser cannon. Oh, did you see that today? Saying it looks, it looks like a big jet engine sitting out there, but then when it fires up, it fired and it looked like, like a cement air tower kind of almost, and it obliterated that thing.
Wow. Cool.
I've never seen it before, but I wouldn't doubt it because we've been working with lasers for a long, long time.
Well,
okay.
So Jeff, do you want to address Arthur's, like the article said it was $13. It was like 5 pounds or 7 pounds British.
Yeah.
Is that, like,
well, it's
what do you think
the
our cost is per shot?
Well, it's just the electricity. I mean, and then, you could depreciate the system. How many shots can you get before you have to rebuild it? That kind of stuff. But you're not physically shooting anything.
Yeah.
It's just how much money does it cost to generate that kind of power for a burst? And the bursts aren't very long.
No.
They can be milliseconds because they hit with so much energy. And a lot of times what they'll do is they'll actually pulse it so that you're popping it, and it shakes it apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the curvature of the Earth, I just looked it up real quick, is it's 8 inches for every mile of horizontal surface.
100 miles away then is a long ways.
Yeah, it's 800 inches. So how far are you up in the air when you're shooting them? That kind of thing.
Because I think somebody do something different may have said. Somebody said it takes like 4 miles to worry about the curvature of the Earth. That seems like a long ways though, but I don't know.
4 miles is 20. That would be 32 inches.
Yeah,
Almost 3 feet.
Yeah.
So
So
it
if
depends on
they're
the size of the target, really.
yeah, if the target's 10 feet tall, you can shoot it for a long way away.
Yeah.
And if your laser's up high, you're
Yeah.
kind of shooting across too.
Definitely an interesting topic. So the next one up, we're getting close to being through the sit rep here. Musk, reposted this wise words. Mercy to the guilty is cruelty to the innocent. So you have these 3 young white girls viciously attacked by these, career criminal thugs that the judicial system just keeps letting them back, on the streets. Lord only knows how many of them are out there. The rabbit hole says, I wish the media cared more about innocent victims versus criminal victims. Mentions in the New York Times, Bethany McGee, so the one who was just set on fire by that scumbag, not mentioned in the New York Times at all. George Floyd, drug dealer, career criminal, 6,239 times. Absolutely abhorrent. The media are a bunch of scumbags. And if the media would actually do their job, we wouldn't have podcasts like Survival Dispatch News. But Jeff, any comments you want to make as far as this revolving door for scumbags is concerned?
Well, and someone said this today, there almost needs to be a liability for these judges who do this.
I could get behind that.
And just, say, let them out. You shouldn't have. You used your discretion to let them out instead of put them in jail. They went out and committed more crime. That's on you. But for you letting them out, they wouldn't have committed that crime. So
exactly.
Yeah.
That's a major bone to pick here. Randy, you get final shot at this. Is the last one for the sit rep.
Well, I think that they had 125 arrests between the 3 of them or something like that, or even more. I mean, it's a lot.
Big number.
It's a big number between the 3 of them. I think I was looking at roughly 50 to 75 each, something like that, which is crazy. But yeah, if we make a law, right, where bartenders, you overserve somebody and they drive off and have a wreck and kill somebody, or they get called, they go to jail. These judges are no different, and it should be even more serious. It should have been from them all along. This shouldn't have even had to become a law now. But if you're going to keep letting career criminals out over and over, at some point, you are responsible or culpable for them as well, and all the damage and lives they take or whatever they do. I think we should be throwing those judges in jail. And of course, you know how I feel about all these activist judges. It's time to give them the pink slip and send them on down the way. Venezuela did it.
Well, we've done it. So look up the Judicial Act of 1701 and the Judicial Act of 1702.
Yep, that's right.
For those people who are, not up on their civics, the federal judiciary is a construct of Congress. It is not a co-equal branch of government between the Supreme Court, the executive, and the legislature. So in 1701, the entire federal judiciary was torn down and then rebuilt in 1702, specifically because of partisan bullshit like we've been seeing. I saw a number today. I'm not going to get it exactly right, but Trump has deported something like 1.5 million people, and there have been over 300 violent protests. Obama was something like 8.5 million. George Bush was something like 10.5 million. And Bill Clinton was something like 15 million deported and 0, public displays. I mean, they're literally trying to tear our country apart at the seams. But I'm going to move on from that because we're going to get into the main topic tonight, which is the topic of China rising and the new superpower challenge, because that's really what it boils down to. But their military, economic, and cyber advances reshaping the global balance and threatening our security, in addition to the enemy of my enemy is a friend of mine. So they're teaming up with all the bad actors. So Islamic Army, they've been in bed with Hezbollah for years, cartels, gangs like TDA, rogue states, the list goes on. And this is episode number 61 of a 144 episode series that Khalid and I wrote. Normally what happens when people do video series, anybody who missed the first episode doesn't watch the second episode, doesn't watch the third, but we specifically wrote this entire series, the Long War series, where everything is predicated on being a post 9/11 2.0 world and CCTAs, complex coordinated terrorist attacks. So each video like this one, each podcast like this one, I briefly give you all the lay of the land for anybody who's new. So tons of intelligence showing that the Islamic Army, which is the banner that all the bad guys are under now, they've all teamed up together, calls for simultaneous attacks on 10 to 15 tier 2 American cities. So those are cities with a population between 100,000 and 500,000 with one level 1 trauma center. And there's actually only 16 cities in the nation that fit that profile perfectly. So inside of each of those 10 to 15 cities, now imagine 10 to 15 sleeper cells in each of those cities. And now imagine each of those sleeper cells with somewhere between 4 and 12 jihadis each. And now imagine them attacking multiple locations simultaneously in each of these cities, then sitting there waiting for the first responders to show up, blowing up VBIEDs and other types of explosives, so vehicle-borne IEDs, to take out as many first responders as they can. So I will preach this through the entire series that we're doing. If you take nothing else away from our podcast, and you are so unfortunate as to find yourself on or near the X when 9/11 2.0 kicks off, or any terrorist attack happens, get as far away from the X as fast as you can. Do not trust first responders, because there's a long-standing tradition of these jihadis dressing up like military, law enforcement, paramedics. There's been a ton of uniforms stolen across the country. You can't trust them. You're probably not going to be thinking perfectly straight to say, oh, wait a minute, that cop is carrying a Baofeng radio, so I know that's not a cop. It's got to be a jihadi. You're probably not going to be that swift when you just survived an attack at the X. So if nothing else, get as far away as fast as you can. Those terror cells will continue on beyond secondary and tertiary attacks, and then will converge on the level 1 trauma center. There's lots of intel says they'll probably pull up a box truck or something to that effect, like Timothy McVeigh, and blow it up at the front door and then siege these tier 1 hospitals. Think on average around 3,000 people in the hospitals between staff and patients, many more than that. And then think of a long, long siege where they use that as their home base to torture and maim and kill Americans and broadcast videos. The FBI has 4 HRT teams, hostage rescue teams. They're not trained to unsiege buildings where there are thousands of people being held hostage. They're trained for much smaller types of encounters. So the only force that we have that's capable really of clearing buildings like this is Delta Force. And we don't have enough to unsiege 15 hospitals in short order. So there will be some element of triaging them. And it's going to be brutal, because we have additional intel showing that they're working with all kinds of nerve agents like sarin, that these guys will be jacked up on all kinds of drugs. Not a new tactic. I know guys that were manning machine guns in Iraq and Afghanistan, manning a position with a machine gun, and jihadis storming them and unloading every single round they had from M240s, M249s, and these guys not dropping until they just got a matter of a few feet away, because they don't feel anything when they're that jacked up on all these drugs. There's been even some recent intel showing it's going to be even worse with this round with the jihadis. So at the end of the day, China has been joined at the hip to many of these bad actors for a long time. And like I mentioned, in particular, Hezbollah. So Hezbollah in the Middle East is funded by the IRGC. Hezbollah outside of the Middle East is referred to as Unit 910. It's not one unit, but that's what they refer to the rest of their soldiers around the world. They have to fund themselves. So they got joined at the hip with the cartels, in particular Sinaloa cartel in the 1990s, to get in on the drug trade, and then, child sex trafficking, human trafficking after that, to fund their operations. If you look at a lot of the cartel tactics, TTPs, you'll see that they mirror jihadi tactics because of Hezbollah's role. So Hezbollah and Sinaloa hooked up with the CCP all those years ago to be the conduit to flood our country with low-grade fentanyl, right? They send the precursors from China to Latin America. They have these crude labs that make a very crude form of fentanyl. It's one of the reasons that you see people dying from it, because the dosing is not always, exactly perfect. And as a result of that, we now have Hezbollah soldiers, I don't know what else to call them, jihadis, terrorists, that look identical to their counterparts in the cartels. They speak Spanish with the same accent as the cartels. They're almost virtually indistinguishable from cartel members. So that's kind of the beginning of China getting in bed with these guys, but it goes far, far beyond that. So Beijing is transferring all kinds of money into groups that hate us, giving them tools for large scale chaos. Case in point, and I'll get back to Jeff and Randy here in just a second, it would be the sim farms that were found in New Jersey, where they were capable of making hundreds of thousands of phone calls simultaneously. That equipment is incredibly regulated and controlled in the United States. You don't go out and buy any of that equipment. You have to be a big player. You have to be a telco like an AT&T, a Verizon, government, whatever the case may be. That is all stuff that was manufactured in China and given to adversaries here. Some of it probably operated by the Chinese themselves, but much of it given to, the enemy of my enemy is a friend of mine, so to speak. So when 9/11 2.0 kicks off, it's not just dodging bombs and bullets from, jihadis. It's also all of the follow-on stuff. So, for example, when this shit kicks off, don't expect the power grid en masse or the interwebs or the cell phone networks to go down immediately, because they will want everybody to know what they've done, number one. Number two, the handlers back in Kabul, Afghanistan, they have these huge control centers full of people monitoring social media, news coverage, who are in contact with the sleeper cells saying, hey, you need to pivot, go attack over here, go attack over there, stay right where you are, the target's coming to you, those sort of things. So they need it to communicate that stuff as well. Now, afterwards, when people aren't going to work, supply chains break down, obviously kids aren't going to school, that's when you're going to see more infrastructure go down. And it could be kinetic attacks on substations. It could be cyber attacks on the grid or other infrastructure that we have. So, Jeff, I'm going to come to you first. I'd like to get your thoughts on China's got a lot of cash, and what are your thoughts on the Chinese global cash flow funding these terrorist groups without giving up any information that you can't give up from when you're in the CIA? Don Mann, your co-CIA friend of ours, gave me some exposure information 3 years ago, and he told me, you can't repeat this on air. So I'm not asking you to repeat that stuff, but just lay out how dangerous this money is. You're on mute too, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly dangerous. Anytime you give money to a terrorist, it's dangerous because of what are they going to do with it? And it doesn't even have to be direct cash payments. It can be giving them drugs to sell, or they buy drugs from you and sell it for 5 times, 10 times as much. Yeah. So that doesn't even have to be necessarily, it could be cash going the other way. It could be from the terrorist group to the Chinese. But what are they getting? They're buying drugs that they turn around and sell for a huge profit. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to be so much China handing them a suitcase full of cash. They don't have to.
Yeah, that makes sense. So give me your thoughts just on the first wave of attacks from 9/11 2.0, where you see involvement at that stage from the Chinese.
Well, what I could see with the Chinese is waiting for them to do the initial attack. And then, they want all this out, but then they want to shut things down afterwards to make it worse on us, like shut down the power grids and things like that. I don't think Hezbollah or these guys have that ability to do it on such a large scale, but the Chinese do. So the Chinese may time it to make it worse.
We just lost Randy. Hopefully he'll be back shortly, but put this into your, calculus, Jeff. So China's counterterrorism pledge is a sham. April 22nd, Falgam attack. Terrorists used Hawaii phone with Chinese satellite link to message Pakistan. 120 plus Chinese satellite images of Falgam sent to Pakistan before attack. Beijing aiding terror despite, SCO vows. How's that play into your line of thinking? I mean, that seems like they're involved in that command and control piece.
Well, it could be, but it's more likely just logistics. You're gonna attack someone we don't like, so we'll give you access to satellite communications and equipment and things like that. And they may even sell it to them for a nominal fee, so they can say, "Don't look at us, man. Some guy just bought some radios from us. We had no idea what he was going to do with it." But
Plausible
yeah,
deniability.
plausible deniability. But yeah, I'm sure they do. But to be honest, someone could also get a Starlink and use that in the same manner. It doesn't mean Elon Musk is supporting them. It just means it's a commercially available telecommunications platform that they can buy.
Well, I would counter that by saying that China is not a typical country where private industries do what they want to do, and that information like this probably has, in my mind at least, the CCP's got their finger in that, in the.
But they're probably giving them a nod, saying, "Yeah, you can sell that to those guys."
Makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense.
We won't complain.
Randy, just a in general type of question. Why are the feds not screaming this from the top of their lungs as far as 9/11 2.0, but even the Chinese piece? We're not hearing anything of it from FBI and the other ones. And seems to me it's a massive dereliction of duty and that they will end up having a lot of blood on their hands.
Well, I mean, you look at, we can go all the way back to 2015, 2016, right? When all this Russia thing started. But you got to notice, you think about it, and during some of those years is where we heard that they had put pressure on the NBA because one of the players said something about China in a bad light, Hollywood. So they basically went and bought off everybody. So that's why it's no different than, we don't hear about Jess Buddies on the news anymore either. You never, ever hear the CIA mentioned on the news anymore, ever. And just like China, you never hear them on the news anymore. They'll never talk about China. They don't say anything bad about China. It's because all those people are bought off. That's the problem with it, and China's playing the long game. I knew in whatever the 90s it was when Clinton was in office and it came on the news and they announced that he had given them a nuclear reactor and a military high-speed computer because they promised not to use them for military applications. And then that's when he turned on the juice for all this manufacturing, because before that, China didn't make shit.
That's right.
And now you look at, that was like 92 or something like that. So really here we are 30 years later, basically, roughly. And we are now, and he said it would be good for everybody, the whole world. This would be good for us. It would be good for China. Well, it hasn't been good for us. No. Because now, as somebody mentioned earlier, they even make all our pharmaceuticals. But when it comes down to all this other stuff, yeah, they're going to help them with communications. Why wouldn't they? Because they have way better communication assets than Hamas or the jihadis or even Iran has. So, and then they've made all the electronics, all of them, our phones and everything else. So that if you don't, I've been telling people this for at least 20 years, certainly since the iPhone came out. But if you don't think that China didn't put a backdoor into your shit that they made, you are sadly mistaken, because that is how they operate. And so then go to the power grid. Yeah, they probably don't even have to blow the damn thing up. They probably got a back door where they can run it just by pushing a button within a certain, footage from wherever, the one they're trying to shut down. They might even be able to do it from China with just pushing a button on a computer, boom, and shut all 9 of those down.
What a great argument to make in favor of Yaesu, who makes that radio Father Duck sent you. It's Japanese components, Japanese manufacturing,
all of it,
as well as the ICOMs. That is like a China-free product there.
Well, I'm down with the Japan products because, so far they've still been our friend. And, the Japanese are not the same as the Chinese, and they never have been.
True.
The fact is the Japanese have whooped China's butt 3 or 4 times throughout history. They've never been able to defeat Japan.
Right.
However, today we've given them a lot of power, as I just mentioned, and a lot of money, and as you mentioned, all these products, including the one you mentioned with the Ramba, but probably even the Alexa and everything else. That's what I told people. They're like, oh, I don't care if China's spying on my stuff or if our authorities are. This is how bad Americans have gotten, right?
Yeah.
I don't care about that because I'm not doing anything bad or illegal. So I'm not going to get in trouble. And I'm trying to say, hey, well, what happens? Let's just take that a little further. What happens if we happily get in a conflict with China? What happens then? Because all those other times, including the movie we mentioned, Red Dawn, and every other time in history, including when we've invaded countries, you have to go about finding out all this information. Who people are, who the leaders are, who the troublemakers are, and who are the people that are the movers and shakers. They're going to already know, as you mentioned earlier, they're already going to have all that information if they ever ended up here, and they won't have to look it up. And then you will see just how stupid you were by thinking, that don't matter because I'm not doing anything illegal.
Right. So let me add this for you and Jeff. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas condemned recent sabotage acts, including an explosion at a Polish rail link to Ukraine, labeling them as state-sponsored terrorism by Russia. She called for greater EU unity against China, which she referred to as a key enabler of Russia's war efforts. I'll come back to you on this one, Jeff, just because it's in your wheelhouse. It seems to me that China is willing to pretty much back anybody and everybody who's an adversary or potential adversary of ours.
Well, yeah, there's the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But the other thing, too, is they're making money on this.
Oh, yeah.
And you can't separate Chinese business from Chinese foreign policy because their business is their foreign policy. They go into a country, they establish commercial ties, they finance infrastructure projects, and then when they don't get paid, they take it over.
Yep.
So their business is essentially an arm of their foreign policy. And, most countries do this in one way or another. We certainly do. We give, foreign aid to a country and then say, oh, yeah, by the way, we do expect you to vote with us in the UN next week on this resolution. And they go, okay, sure, we'll do that. But they're much more aggressive with it and more ham-fisted with it and much more sinister because they can literally destroy a country through these these deals, and they did it to as funny as they did it to Venezuela. They were demanding, they would do infrastructure projects for Venezuela and want to get paid in oil, and they basically said either you pay us or we're going to turn everything off, and they get paid first.
It's their Belt and Road Initiative, right? Where they've gone into all these poor countries and said, hey, we'll build out all this infrastructure for you. We'll give you, loans for the whole thing. And, behind closed doors, they're like, we know they're not going to ever be able to pay us. So we're just going to exercise the clause that gives us ownership over all of their resources. At the end of the day. So last one on this opening segment. The other four segments aren't as long as this first one. I just want to do as best as we can as far as laying out the threat. So this from the Heritage Foundation. More Islamist terror is coming. We are woefully unprepared. That was earlier this year. I'm not going to read the whole article, but there is cause to believe we have set ourselves up for the next Islamist campaign against America. We have demobilized our counterterrorism efforts. Pretty much every instrument we established since 9/11 1.0 has been diverted, distracted, disabled, or dismissed. How do we stop them? By using our counterterrorism capabilities the way they were intended. So I'm coming back to you first on this, Jeff, just because you were directly involved in this. You were in Afghanistan and you were part of that whole counterterrorism, infrastructure. What on earth is going on with our government taking their foot off the gas on this stuff? You're on mute too, by the way, Jeff.
It's just, I really think it kind of boils down to it's just so hard. And, and when you have success, it's not obvious success. It's not political. When you fail, it's very obvious. But when you're successful, it's really not. You look at the global war on terrorism. We would take out guys with drones and there was an explosion in the middle of nowhere in Afghanistan and you took out the leader of some terrorist group. How many people even knew that happened? Very few.
Right.
And so people want, and if you do it right, nobody really knows about it. But politicians want something they can go to their constituents and say, this is what I did. This is how I spent your money. This is what I'm working on. And when you do something where results are not obvious or are not tangible, they go, I'll spend my time on something else.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Quick thank you to Alaska Forever North. No oil, no China. Simple. All right. Let me pull that up so everybody can see it. And we appreciate the tip as well. Thank you. And then this comment here, I think this is Sarah, if memory serves me right. Bondi is Florida AG, stepped down on Epstein trial, and Bill Gates not charged as pedo after giving CIA backdoor access to all his Microsoft applications and software, espionage traders. So when Bondi was put in as the AG, I started objecting immediately because she was our AG here in Florida at one point in time. She's the entire reason that we have red flag laws here in Florida. And sure as shit, I predicted it that she would start going after 2A rights and guns, and it started. So I don't want to take us too far off course on that, but check out Pam Bondi's recent work on gun rights. It's bad news. It's really, really bad news. So moving into segment number 2, Beijing's military makeover, hybrid tactics that hit hard. Actually, I got to back up just for a second. I noticed somebody mentioned aircraft carriers. So the first Chinese aircraft carrier was a Russian cargo ship, and it's so small that when they launch planes off of it, they either carry half the munitions or half the fuel, but they can't have both. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, the second one that they made has this crazy ski ramp at the end because of the lack of electromagnetic pulse launching systems. There's tons of videos out there of J-35s, which is our F-35 ripped off, hitting the ski jump and then going boop and promptly falling into the ocean. The third one, which was just put out to sea, has been under lock and key for several years because both the second and the third one, we have satellite imagery of the decks cracking like this, 18 to 24 inch cracks from stem to stern. Their technology's shit. It's garbage. But here's the problem. China has over 50% of the world's manufacturing capabilities for military naval vessels. We have 0.5%. What an abomination that is. And that's a whole other ball of wax to get into. And I won't take us down that rabbit hole. But at the end of the day, China is stacking up assets. Could be jets, drones, nukes. I mean, they just turned around and said, well, we think America should get rid of some of their drones, but we're not going to get our nukes, pardon me. We're not going to get rid of ours because, we need to balance out the stage. We need to have as much or more nukes as America, just talking out of both sides of their mouth. But they're clearly going to continue along that path. And a lot of stuff that they've been doing with their military, it's asymmetric warfare, irregular warfare. If you want to think of that in the most simple terms, it's mixing bombs with blackouts. It's really that simple, so it's a totally different battlefield than it has been in the past. But the buildup essentially lets Beijing back these terror plays without getting their hands dirty. Like Jeff said, they'll use them as proxies to strike us, whether they be U.S. bases abroad or cities here in the homeland. And they're kind of hidden, and they're tipping the scales in favor of the jihadis and other enemies who hate us, but trying to put on this bullshit front that, well, we're friends with America. Of course, we would never do anything like that. At the end of the day, the playbook that we used during the Cold War, it is not going to work, not even close to being able to work against what we're facing with China and essentially the shitbags that they're backing. So I'm going to come to you here, Randy, just because you're in the military. Are there any Chinese military products that actually impress you, that are something that we don't have or didn't have when you were in? Or is this a paper tiger? Because the pundits out there will say, and I'm one of them, that the Chinese military products that have been sold to other countries, almost every single time they've either had to refund 100% of the money or given them something else to make up for the lack of quality in their military products.
Well, somebody mentioned it earlier in here, you know what I mean? And the Chinese people hate their government. You know what I mean? There's a lot of them that are not very happy, most of them, in fact. So you got to realize that's the workforce. You know, if you were captured and they put you to work, it's one of the things they teach you in SEER, you know, which has been taught for centuries, in fact. When you're captured and turned into a slave, are you really going to build the best product you could build while you're building? Probably not. And if we look at Russia, China's no different than Russia, that fact. I haven't ever come across any Chinese products except AKs, and they all suck.
Right.
You don't want a Chinese AK. Everybody knows that. But that's the same adage. All the Russian equipment I ever came across, all of it sucked. All of it was bad. And honestly, all the stuff the Iraqis had was, you know, their BMPs, their tanks, all their mechanized, you know, military vehicles were all Russian equipment. And we just went through it like it was a wet paper bag. So I'm just going to assume that China's the same way, because one of the reasons America builds such great products when we actually used to, you know, decades ago, is because everybody's here is free. And you're there to do the best job you can to try to improve your life, your family's life, and maybe move up the chain a little bit, right? So everybody's doing the best that they can. And that's the kind of workforce you want. You don't want a suppressed workforce that's beat down, that's hungry, you know, that don't have anything, because those people don't put in their best effort. So they can have 1 billion men, but it won't come down to the ground, because even if it did, a lot of it would end up looking, I'm going to just call it right now, not all of it, but there would be a fair amount looking like Desert Storm when we went in there and all those Iraqis just gave up in the trenches. They didn't fight. They gave up because they didn't want to be there. I think China will run into the same problem, you know, but the biggest issue is with all the electronics and everything else they built for us already. Somebody also mentioned here, there was no Navy, the Chinese Navy to speak of before 2000, and now they're threatening ours. But the reality is, when we come into a conflict, I guarantee you, ours is going to be superior every single time. And so it would be a war of attrition is what we have to worry about. And then trying to fire up our manufacturing when we haven't done it in decades. That will be our biggest issue. But China, like I said earlier, they're playing the long game. One of the things we haven't mentioned, you know, and this was, I think, before Trump took office the first time, but certainly by the time he did, you know, they went and armed all the international islands around them, leading up to China so that we can't get there. That's illegal. And of course, we told them it was, but I think those admins, and I don't know about the Trump admin, but I know the Obama and the Biden just sent them an angry letter, an email. You can't do that. That's illegal. But they still did it anyway. They armed all of those, and they say they're not armament, but when you look at the pictures, there's surface-to-air missiles on every one of them. That's definitely military products, and including they even built and manufactured a couple of islands so they could arm those too.
Yeah, well said, Randy. Sorry, I just got an email from my buddy Elon Musk saying that because I've been a long time Starlink customer, they're giving me a free Starlink Mini. How do you like that?
Oh, nice.
That's not too.
Well, you know what's funny about X is since my accounts picked up since we've been doing all this, but they're, you know, I find a bunch of single women that are like mid-30s for whatever reason. I'm sure they're bots, but I can't tell you. I probably got 10 or 15 requests from Elon Musk in his personal account. But when I click on them, they definitely don't have millions of followers. It's not Elon.
No, I know. I had somebody way back when sent me a screenshot. They're like, check it out. Elon Musk is following me now. And I'm like, man, I don't mean to piss in your Cheerios, but that ain't Elon Musk.
How many followers do they have? And you look on there and there's like 2, you know.
Hey, check it out, though. There's the email that I just got. Starlink mini kit now included with the rest.
Now, you probably did get that from Starlink. You probably did.
But that's a legit email.
Yeah,
I was joking about Elon being my buddy, but nonetheless, I'm definitely going to take advantage of that. I was actually thinking of buying a mini because I have the standard. Glad I showed some patience for once and actually waited for it. But Jeff, I've got a bunch of questions for you on this. First and foremost, my sometimers is kicking in. I cannot remember the name of the country. And I want to say it was somewhere like 2016, 17, 18. Chinese troops were in Africa on a peacekeeping mission, and they were attacked by a bunch of, low-level tribesmen, and they got their ass handed to them. And it happened during the night. And the reason they say it happened is, number one, China has no modern-day military experience, but their culture is such that until my boss tells me I can do something, I'm not doing it. Whereas Americans, we just lead. It's in our DNA. So the way it went down was the local leader of the Chinese force was unwilling to make a decision because his leader in China, it was nighttime and was probably in bed. And then when he finally got a hold of that guy couldn't get a hold of the next guy. So they sat there like deer stuck in the headlight and got their asses handed to them. Yeah. They've done a masterful job of scrubbing it from the internet, by the way. Last time I looked, it took supreme effort to find anything. I'd like you to comment, though, on the fact they don't have modern day, warfare experience and how that plays out potentially.
Yeah, China hasn't fought a real war since the late 70s when they had a border war with Vietnam and got their asses handed to them. The peacekeeping one you're talking about in Africa, I want to say, was it like Rwanda or Congo or somewhere down there? And, they were on peacekeeping duty through the UN, of course. But yeah, they got their asses handed to them because they couldn't react. They couldn't think on their feet. They couldn't adapt to the situation as it was. They had their orders, and the orders didn't take into account anything that was actually happening to them. And so they went basically condition black.
Yeah, good way of putting it. So, Jeff, add this into your thought process. So, Cyberfront, APT attacks global penetration. Throughout 2025, Chinese APT groups like Volt Typhoon and Salt Typhoon repeatedly infiltrated U.S. critical infrastructure networks, potentially pre-positioning for disruptive attacks. My question to you is, could you speculate on whether or not we have significant numbers in the Department of War that are even trained in this type of asymmetric warfare, or it's, again, I'm going to keep using that term, bombs and blackouts?
We do, actually. In fact, we are probably better at offensive cyber warfare than we are defensive cyber warfare. We have put much more effort and time and energy and money into it. And the example is the Olympic Games virus, commonly known as Stuxnet.
Yeah.
That was something we had done. And we do that stuff. I knew a guy who, I can't say where he was or his company or anything, but he says they would protect secrets or, websites and stuff. And they were so good that when the Chinese hackers were going into a website, to try and disrupt it, they could reverse the signal, so to speak, and turn on the camera on the Chinese hacker's computer and get pictures of him as he was trying to hack that site. And so they would just build a portfolio of all these Chinese hackers, and then they could use facial recognition to go, oh yeah, that's Bo Kwang Kim, and he worked on this one last time, and 2 years ago he did this one. So yeah, we're really good at the offensive. We're just not as good at the defensive because there's no money in it. The government always pays for results. They don't pay for lack of results for the other guys. In a company, when they cut money, when they cut budgets, first things to get cut are training and security every freaking time, because those don't directly impact the bottom line in the short term.
True story. And coming from high tech myself, I can tell you it's a lot less glamorous being the guy protecting networks as opposed to the guy who's breaking into them and causing massive amounts of damage to the enemy. That's not justification at all, but unfortunately,
black hats are more exciting than white hats.
Yeah, exactly. And gray hats as well, for that matter. So moving into segment number 3, economic squeeze. So how trade wars arm terror sleeper cells. So right now, to a certain extent, China kind of has us by the wallet with their grip on factories, shipping routes, funding these terror outfits through backdoor deals that look like normal business, but in reality, like Jeff said, they're bankrolling stuff and doing it from the shadows so that they can say, well, it wasn't us. I mean, we just sell this shit. So, if and when Beijing, for example, were to cut off rare earths or floods markets with cheap junk, it doesn't just hurt farmers and our factories. It's starving our defenses while padding the pockets of these proxies ready to unleash hell in places like Chicago, for example. Actually, Chicago, maybe not the best example. Buffalo, Denver, Portland, those sort of cities. But this money trail turns all of these, supply chain headaches into national security bombs in addition, to being a headache. And it doesn't take much for the Chinese right now to disrupt us by saying, oh, well, we're not going to send this product. We're not going to send that product. Or, we're going to charge 400% tariffs, whatever the case may be. We definitely are not in the best position when it comes to manufacturing and raw goods and supply chains with these guys. And Randy even mentioned antibiotics. Let's just go down that rabbit hole for a second, Randy. What happens if China says, you know what, we're not selling you, antibiotics or meds, or we're not selling you the precursors to those, screw you sort of thing. Holy shit, how fast does the medical system come unwound?
Well, not just antibiotics, all of the pharmaceuticals. Well, they just said, hey, we get in a conflict with them. They're going to say, okay, that's it. And then think about it. Yeah, that would be very bad. But think about all the other medications that people have to take monthly, some even weekly and daily to stay alive with whatever condition they have. And you cut off from that stuff. I don't understand why, unless, you think about what the actual plan is, right, for these people. Because otherwise, none of this makes sense to us. None of it does. But because we think normally, like, most people want society and our country to be safe and to keep growing, where, I think that the people that are in charge have a different outlook on that. And I think that's why some of this is allowed to be done. You think about, nobody's reeled in China for ever since we turned on the button. Mm-hmm. Ever since we turned on the money to them, no one's reeled in China whatsoever. And they go out and do whatever they want, and it doesn't even matter.
True story. Jeff, is there one particular thing, and you might be able to think of more than one, but is there one particular thing that the Chinese could do in the blink of an eye to really juice the jihadi terrorists in their efforts against us?
Yeah, they could give them access to their supply chains and use it to move people and guns instead of everything else. You think about it, since they are the largest manufacturers in the world, they have routes, ships, containers. They have so much material stuff going back and forth. They've got raw materials coming into the country. They've got finished products going out of the country. You think about how many containers leave, China every day. What if they decided to go to Hezbollah or somebody and said, okay, this one's going to Israel. If you guys want to put a bomb in it, go for it.
Good point. That'd be really hard to catch as well.
Yeah.
So that's the end of the third segment. I got a little bit of house cleaning stuff that I want to touch on. First and foremost, for those of you not aware, I get 300 to 500 legitimate emails a day, 7 days a week, and I triage them. And on average, I respond to approximately 80%, give or take. I do not check direct messages on any platform. I don't have the bandwidth or time. So if you sent me a direct message on a platform and I didn't reply and you think I'm ignoring you, I'm not ignoring you. There are not enough hours in the day. The God's honest truth, and my guys and my wife can certainly back this up. I work 16 to 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm on a mission to do whatever we can do to save Americans from 9/11 2.0 to the best of our ability. And I'll work as long as my body will hold out. But that's my entire life revolves around this stuff. So when I can't get to the volume of messages, it's not because I don't care about what you've got to say. I do care about what you have to say. I'm just out of bandwidth. If you have to reach me, send me a message on Signal, or send an email to support@survivaldispatch.com. I'll do my best to get back to you. I'm not ignoring you on purpose, and I want you guys to know that. I want to mention that if you would like to meet some of us from Survival Dispatch and my good friend Keith Graves on the Wednesday of SHOT Show in Las Vegas in January, Keith and I and our friends from Carnival, amongst others, will be at the Vets Tactical booth. And Vets Tactical are the ones who make the capolster. So this is a holster, essentially. I know the lighting's not great here, that goes in your drink holder in your truck or car. And some of them are vertical like this, and commie tube sensors. This is a plastic implement. This is not a firearm. Don't give me another frickin' strike because I showed something on a live broadcast. This is not a gun. But Jeff has firsthand experience with this on the Surviving Man show that we've been part of for years, where the competitors all went against each other with this. Well, we are going to have a competition at SHOT Show, and it's going to be, can you beat Keith Graves, the Christian warrior? And the way it's going to go down is Craig from Vets Tactical is having this special chair made with no arms, with a deck on the side, kind of like a director's chair. And it's going to be using one of these Mantis Titan X training pistols. And because it'll measure everything in the app, and it goes shooter ready, bam, and then you go. And we'll have targets like these laser targets. You get 6 shots at it. But when it goes off, it's going to be pull the pistol from beside you from the capolster, turn 90 degrees to your left, and shoot that target. And whoever scores, the first, second, and third best scores is going to get a bunch of stuff from Vets Tactical. You're going to get a bunch of food from Carnival. And again, there are other people as well. But Keith and I will be at the Vets Tactical booth on the Wednesday of SHOT Show for at least an hour and a half, perhaps 2 hours. And there will be other people from our team there as well. So we'd love to see you all at SHOT Show, and definitely a good chance to hook up there. Beyond that, I want to mention that John Wheaton is working right this minute on wrapping up our video where we compare a bunch of budget NVGs, night vision goggles. And I'm going to spoiler alert here. This is the Sigman, CIGMAN, CNV Pro with the coupon we've got, which is SD12, S's and Sam, D's and David 12. These are the best night vision goggles in that price range by a pretty significant margin. And up until now, it's been the Akezo 200 Seymour at this price point has been our favorite. The Akezo still produces really decent color images at night, but this is 2-year newer technology. Super impressive. The video will probably be released on Thanksgiving Day, but again, it's a spoiler alert. If you're looking for economy NVGs, I think it's like $210, like I said, and go to sigmund.com, CNV Pro, discount code SD12 is already active. Pretty cool stuff. So let's get into segment number 4, which is cyber nightmares, hacking our way of life wide open. So Chinese hackers aren't just peeking anymore. They're burrowing deep into our grids and phones, planting bugs that could flip off lights and water in dozens of cities at the push of a button during whatever type of dust up it be, whether it's 9/11 2.0 or something over Taiwan. And this is what Randy spoke to earlier. So, I mean, these digital bad guys use everything from fake updates for products, and they trick people into applying them, and that in turn becomes a Trojan horse. Stolen passwords. And actually, let me speak about that just quickly for a second. So I have a friend of mine. He was a spec ops comms guy in the U.S. Army, then NASA, and all NASA does is comm stuff. Now he's back in the Army. And while he was at the NSA, they were under strict orders not to use any messaging app except for Signal. Signal is open source software. What that means is you can lift the hood and you can look inside at all the parts. And for people like myself who are programmers, I have probably checked their GitHub, which is where they store the source code, over 100 times over the years to just check in and see what's going on in the code base. You can't hide back doors when you've written this, you've viewed the source code that's not been compiled into some sort of binary blob. So when you hear somebody say, oh, well, there was a vulnerability in Signal. No, there wasn't. The vulnerabilities that they're pointing to, and the press seems to be particularly bad at this, is they say, well, you know, they compromised it because they tricked the user into giving them your username and password. And that's a phishing attempt. And that's social engineering. And that has nothing to do with Signal or any other app. That means that they tricked the person into giving up their credentials. That is not an app vulnerability. That's what we call in the tech industry PEBCAC, PEBKAC. Problem exists between keyboard and chair, and people giving up their information when they shouldn't be. So always be on the lookout for that. But when somebody says, "Oh, well, you know, Signal's, you know, been hacked," no, it hasn't. The people were hacked, and there's a big difference. So with that being said, I mentioned Volt Typhoon in that last X post there. So Volt Typhoon is a CCP black hat hacking group that works very closely with the North Koreans, the Iranians, the Venezuelans. The list goes on. Everybody who's, you know, not on our side, for lack of a better term. They're the guys who have the ability that when 9/11 2.0 hits and the word gets out to everybody, in it, which it might be 3-4 days, a week after the day actually happens, just go flick. They turn off the grid in one part of the country. Flick, they turn off the data network, the telephone carrier networks, all of that sort of stuff. Just briefly, reminder for people, we have 55,000 substations in America. We have 3 physical grids, the East grid, the West grid, the Texas grid. Sometimes the grids are briefly connected. When California was out of power during the summer, Texas would connect to the West grid, send some power towards California, but then they disconnect from it. 55,000 substations. Out of the 55,000 substations, there are 9 substations. This is public information. I am not enabling our enemies. Don't send me the hate mail saying I shouldn't be talking about this stuff. Security through obscurity doesn't work either. But 9 substations, 3 substations per grid, and you take out power to 95% of America as far as grid power is concerned, because you would have to be between the power generation plant and that first substation to not be subject to the balance of the grid going down. So to say these guys have us by the short and curlies, that's a big, that doesn't even come close to how bad things are. Let's put it that way. So just imagine, you know, Volt Typhoon and other bad actors in the background coordinated with the jihadis on the street and making sure that everything is timed just so to do the maximum damage to America. Imagine this, 9/11 2.0 hits, word spreads like wildfire, 15 hospitals under siege with thousands of people in them, planes detonating over downtown cores at very low altitude, and body parts and luggage and plane parts falling all over the place. And then imagine what happens when they nuke the power, they nuke communications. Now what happens? Think back to kindergarten where you said to the person beside you, blue. And by the time it went through 20 kids and got to the end, it was green or whatever the color was. That's how information will travel when all that stuff goes down. And there'll be a lot of misinformation. There'll be a lot of amplified fear. There will be some legit information in there, but how do you discern between the two of them? And just a personal plug, this is one of the reasons we encourage people to be a survival dispatch guardian. We've got a sale coming up on that, and I'll get more into that as we get closer to Thanksgiving. Point being is that there are multiple different communication options that each of us need to have. 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 is none. Okay, that's fine for most people. As JP likes to joke at me in the Guardians, I'm like 40 is 39. And 39 is 38 and all the way down. If you saw my workroom right now with all the comms gear in it, you would go, what on earth is going on in there? We do have a kick-ass comms video coming up on that subject, by the way. So with all of that being said, Jeff, I'm going to come back to you first before I go back to Randy. I want to know what you think is the dumbest weak spot in our infrastructure, network infrastructure, that the Chinese are laughing about and fully prepared to exploit.
Power grid and our reliance on intermittent renewables.
If I had just said, Jeff, you're on mute just to mess with you, would that have been okay or not? Because the thought crossed my mind.
I unmuted before.
I know you did. That's why I was going to mess with you.
Oh.
Sorry.
But no, our power grid, it's okay. One, it's vulnerable to cyber attack and has been forever because nobody takes the threat seriously.
Mhm.
But then on top of that, it's unstable because we rely too much on unstable power sources,
Right.
solar and wind turbines. And it's like, how stupid is that? That's like having a paper mache door on your house and wondering why they kicked it in.
You're well traveled, Jeff. Speaking of stupid, how stupid is it that our whole electrical grid is above ground instead of in the ground like other countries where it doesn't get smoked by things like hurricanes?
Well, yeah, that's easy to complain about, but when you're a country our size, it costs a lot of money to bury power cables.
Sure does.
And California, they were talking about, because they had a fire started because of the power cable shorted out or something. But they said, yeah, we can bury the main lines. It'll cost $13 billion just for California. And nobody was willing to write that check. And they said, we can do it. We'll have to charge it back to the customers. Well, California already has the most expensive electricity in the continental U.S. So the politicians were not willing to bite that bullet. But even then, the problem wasn't the power grid. The problem was the maintenance.
Yeah.
You can have a high voltage, high tension line that is safe, but you got to maintain it. You got to clean the insulators. You got to cut back the brush in the trees. We just do. And underground is not the be all end all, because there's a thing known in business known as backhoe fade. It's like when they dig up a fiber optic line. Yeah. Same thing happens with power lines. Same thing happens with pipelines. You always get some idiot who's digging, hits a gas pipeline, boom, you don't have gas for 5 days while they fix it.
Living here in Hurricane Central in Florida and the amount of damage that happens when we have hurricanes, I myself would like to see an investment in putting taking our third world power grid to a first world type of status, including putting stuff underground that they can, because we're going to pay for it anyway, because it's going to get wrecked in the next hurricane, sort of thing. But I mean, I understand what you're saying. There's good points to be made on both sides.
If you have a 3,000-mile high tension line that's going to the middle of nowhere, for them, it's much cheaper to replace the odd tower when it gets damaged by a hurricane, by a tornado or something, than it is to bury 3,000 miles of high tension line.
Let me ask you this before I go back to Randy. Every single Congress for over 30 years has had a bill introduced to harden our grid. And the cost today, they say, is somewhere around $5 billion. They're saying Zelensky, by the way, laundered something like $50 billion now. So 10 times that number. Every single Congress, whether it's blue, red, or whatever, has shot that down. Why do we not have the resolve to spend a small amount of money in the big picture to harden our electrical grid? What is stopping that from happening? My only thing is, and it's not the whole picture, but unions. And I like some unions in some scenarios, not many, but a couple, they have justification. But in this case, it's a make work project, keeping things the way they are.
Yeah, a lot of it is. It's like, why did the teachers' unions always come out against higher standards for teachers? Because most of their people can't meet those standards. And they make more money hiring other, if you can hire 3 union teachers to do the job of 1 teacher, you're going to do that.
Right.
They don't work for us. They don't work for the children. They work for them, for their union members. And it's their interests that they have in mind, not the general public.
Legit. And before anybody jumps my shit about unions, I'm talking very few instances where there is some value to having unions. I am not a big believer, to tell you the truth, of the right to work stuff that we have here in Florida. You can work for a company for 30 years, do a great job, and they could decide that they no longer want you and kick you to the curb, and you lose everything you put into it. That's dirty. And I'm a hardcore libertarian, lowercase L, not capital L. But I don't think that's fair to, to boot people like that, because they use it to do things like they did at Disney about 15 years ago, where they went to the entire IT team here in Orlando and they said, yeah, we're replacing all of you with H-1Bs and you're going to be training them for the next 3 months and then you're going to be done. And there were multiple people there that had worked for Disney for decades. That is bullshit. And that, so when I say there are specific examples, that's what I mean. I'm not a union guy, but in that case, it was horribly abused, the right to work stuff. So Randy, last time around, I asked you why the government isn't screaming from the top of their lungs about this stuff. Well, same question, but why are high-tech companies, and again, that's the industry I come from, why aren't they screaming about this and saying the Chinese are infiltrating all of our stuff, we need to do something about it? They don't say a damn thing.
Well, because I think the Chinese probably own them, right, to some degree. I mean, otherwise, why wouldn't you? Because they don't want to bite the hand that feeds them, or where their money's coming from, or, you know, or who the boss is getting paid by, basically, is what, you know.
Well, I can't say disagree. I mean, follow the money, right?
That's where, I mean, that's generally how it goes, isn't it? And certainly in this realm, that's definitely where it goes. It always comes down to the money, you know.
So, I mean,
I like Alaska's last comment right there. Term limits and public financing will solve a lot of our problems in this country, followed closely by mass deportations. Amen to that.
Yeah, a big amen to that. So let me show you this, Randy. China's hackers are setting traps, not stealing jewels. Forget smash and grab. Beijing is planting digital landmines across U.S. systems so they can flip the switch later. They're hacking water utilities, ports, telecom networks, and even endpoint security tools, all while pretending to be quiet. One group, Volt Typhoon, has tunneled so deep into U.S. infrastructure, it could mess with everything from pipelines to your tap water. Salt Typhoon reportedly tapped the phones of Trump, Vance, and top officials. Silk Typhoon, these are all different branches of the same cyber terrorism group, breached the Treasury, dropped zero-day exploits, and even filed patents for custom cyber weapons. Yes, patents. So 0 day in the tech world basically means a vulnerability that has not previously been identified or disclosed or stumbled upon. This is pretty organized stuff, Randy. It's very disconcerting, especially like Jeff has talked at length about them, you know, vandalizing our water systems. That's basic living, right? No water, dead.
Well, it kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier. You know what I mean? The news hasn't mentioned China in an adverse way in quite some time. We had no problem in America talking about China, and they were our biggest enemy, even on the news. But you've seen all that dry up in the last 20 or 30 years. And then you look at all the tech world, they pretty much own it because they build everybody's products from Apple to everybody else. So, you know, it all comes from there. So they own those people. You're going to have to work deals with them to get your next product built, right? So they can squeeze those people that way. And I have no doubt they have, because that's what China does. I mean, and I mean, dude, you know, no one, I mean, then the other part of it is, you know, I guess I kind of lost my train of thought there, but basically, you know, they own them. So they're not going to speak out against them. No different than news is. Heck, even the NBA wouldn't. Now, how does that matter? Well, I guess they've given them enough money, but we all know, even, you know, we can go back really when I think China started making their move was when Carter got elected, because I know, although it was in the 70s, people don't realize President Carter was elected on Chinese money. So they had already bought the Democrat Party. And then, you know, Clinton came along and then gave them all the rest of the stuff. And all we're sitting here watching, you know, but think about it for a second. Everybody has sold out to them. You know, professors, universities, they've all sold them secrets. Heck, we saw even one of the big defense contractors here a few years ago gave them a classified part, or the specifications for a classified part on the F-35. And all they did was get a slap on the wrist and a fine and not to do it again. Where traditionally and historically in this country, if you were a defense contractor and you committed treason and selling our enemy the specifications to a classified part, because if me, you, or Jeff did this, you know, they probably would have put us to death, but we definitely would still be under the prison. They would leave no stone unturned to ruin us in every facet that they could. But, you know, no one does anything about it because apparently all the politicians are owned by China as well.
Right. Yeah. So just because we're the exact same age, 56, and I've got sometimers just like you do. For those people who don't know what sometimers is, it's kind of like Alzheimer's, but different. Sometimes I remember, sometimes I forget. So I have a dead tree pad beside me at all times. And that way I can jot things down so that my sometimers doesn't screw me up like that. Get this into you. I have a friend who's been a global high-tech sales guy for 40 years. 20 years ago, he was in a Chinese plant standing in a blueprint room, and they had blueprints for the F-35 laid out. They weren't even translated into any Chinese language, Cantonese, and I can't remember what the other one is, Mandarin. It wasn't translated either. It was all in English. So he kind of, as subtly as he could, he took pictures of it. He comes home to Utah, calls the FBI, and says, hey, this is my name. This is the company I work for. I've been traveling globally for decades, selling high-tech stuff. I was just in China. Here's where I was. I have pictures showing, you know, that they have our blueprints for the F-35, blah, blah, blah. What do you think the FBI's response was? Don't bother us with this shit. Never call us again. That's paraphrased, but that's the gist of what it was. So, I mean,
bought and paid for.
Yeah, my watch is going off now that I mentioned the FBI shit. God dang.
But again, it come down to, you know, my problem is with, you won't hear anybody, including our media or any of our politicians, except a few, speak out against China. You just won't see them do it. Yeah, that's it. It all comes down to the money. And, you know, unfortunately, their whole system is a house of cards. You're right. They're not going to get rid of us totally because their whole house would fold. Because all that money they printed, they're worse than us. Oh, yeah, yeah.
3 weeks of crushing tariffs destroyed their already shaky, you know, economy. And I've been saying this for several years on SDN now. People don't realize how weak China is economically. I have another friend who has had products manufactured there since the 80s. And he told me not too long ago, for like the third time, that the CCP is telling the Chinese people that 40% of their plants are closed. It's the exact opposite. 60% of the plants are closed. People are going back to the country because China was a country of farmers before we fueled their industrial revolution. And it's the only way they can put food on the table. You have complete turnkey cities ready for millions of people where nobody lives in them. They're complete ghosts. Just the custodians run them. Over 50% of Chinese men 40 years and younger will never have kids and will never be married because of the one-child policy that China had for many, many years. Yeah. They are not strong economically. And just because we're on this topic, I'm going to say it quickly. If you had $1 million and you converted it to 1 million seconds, it's 11 days of time. If you had $1 billion and you converted it to seconds, it's 31.67 years. That's a big jump from a million to a billion. If you had $1 trillion and you converted it to 1 trillion seconds, you would have 31,667 years. None of us can get our heads wrapped around just how big that is monetarily. We are going to exceed 32 trillion in GDP this year. China's going to struggle to get to 16 trillion, maybe 17 trillion. Do the math. It's the equivalent of 500,000 years of time. China is not the biggest economy. At best, they're 50% the size of our economy. But because we are so freaking big, the difference between us and them is a country mile. Go to number 3, Germany. 4.5 trillion is what they'll probably do this year. Go down to the next tier of industrialized countries. There's about 10 that are in the 3 to 3.5 trillion range. And then there's about another 10 that are in the 2 to 2.5 trillion. These are insignificant compared to the size of our economy. Nobody even comes close. So I'll get off that diatribe and take us into the final segment. Gearing up. Can America fight back before it's too late? So we know at least Gen Xers and above have the brains and the guts to push back on this stuff. And we've done pretty good, I would say, under Trump as far as sealing our borders are concerned. And we don't have a heavy infiltration of Chinese junk into our Department of War or law enforcement, with one exception. It's illegal for agencies to have Japanese drones, DJI drones, and they still represent about 65-70% of government-owned drones, not the ISR drones, not the Predators, but the next level down FPV drones. And I want to say that they're currently sitting around 90% market share in the consumer space. And this is a serious security problem in itself, by the way, that I'll quickly mention. January 19th of this year, DJI pushed out a mandatory update for all of their drones. And basically, when a DJI drone knows that there's an update available, you can't launch it into the air until you apply the update. The update removed all of the restricted airspace geofencing for the entire country. So what that means is, prior to that point in time, if you tried to fly a drone into restricted airspace, it wouldn't. It would refuse your orders unless you hacked it to go through there. Now what's happening is you can fly these drones into any restricted airspace that you want. You might get caught, but as soon as they do that, all of the intelligence that they can gather through aerial photography is going straight back to DJI in China, which then in turn hands it to the CCP. They're essentially a CCP organization. I mean, this is way beyond a onion that you're peeling layers. It's way worse.
Well, they did the same thing with Zoom, right? That's why they had to be removed from Zoom, because
correct.
That's what China. That's what I was telling people. That's what China does. If they're going to build something, they're going to have a spy network in there. It's just the way they operate.
Absolutely. So, at the end of the day, I personally feel that we're behind on training everything from local agencies to the troops and everything in between as far as hybrid warfare is concerned. I'm pleased that Jeff was able to report that we do have some efforts ongoing there. I don't see it at the state, county, and local level myself, but what do I know? I think we could do better. Basically, we don't hear of drills being run very frequently by law enforcement agencies, for example, that mix this asymmetrical, fifth generation warfare where you have cyber mixed in with kinetic and everything else. And I don't know that the majority of law enforcement officers, and keep in mind, we have a serious shortfall of quality law enforcement officers because of the 2020 defund the police. A bunch of people quit. They had to lower the standards. Now, even though we're still way, every agency in the country, they say typically averages around right now 70% of what they should have for the head count. Some are better, some are worse, but the problem is it's not 70%. It might be 50%, because that other 20% are post 2020 cops who weren't qualified, and they dropped the barrier to entry so low that we have people like Acorn Cop here in Florida. It's a bad deal, for crying out loud. But at the end of the day, all we can do, like from a survival dispatch perspective, is get the information out there. That is our mission. Dispatch information to our fellow Americans, friends of America, so that you can survive in these very dangerous times. But the more information that gets out there, hopefully we can put pressure on some officials. I think most of the officials, like Randy said, are bought, but some of the officials to try and affect some element of change. But I'm going to come back to you first. Oh, Jeff's not. Oh, there he is. Jeff's back. Jeff, you first on this one. Is there something that's like a quick fix, like one quick fix that you can think of that would help harden those 10 to 15 tier 2 cities against, whether it be China plus the terrorists, or one or the other, that you think we would get a really good ROI on just by literally flicking a switch and saying, hey, we're making this change?
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything that's going to be that dramatic and that easy.
That's the wrong answer.
Well, what I've said before, though, I would like to see is decoupling of systems, so that you can't take down 10 systems with pushing one button. And
give the audience an example, Jeff.
Well, the power grid, for example, everything is linked together, and they're all run by SCADA systems, and you can cause a cascading failure, especially if you're doing it on purpose, because you know where the weak links are in the system, and you cause a cascading failure, which is why when you get a blackout in New York City, they had a blackout in New York City that went all of New England, part of Canada into
Right.
Ohio.
Yeah.
In the old days, that never would have happened because those were different systems. But they're designed that way now so they can support each other. If one has to draw power, they can, Ohio can sell power to Pennsylvania, or Pennsylvania can sell power to New York as they need it. I get why they do that, but it makes the system more vulnerable.
Yeah, good point. Exactly. So, Randy, next question up for you. I don't know that it would do any good, but do you have any suggestions for people how they could push their reps at all levels of government to actually improve our domestic defenses and get out of this bubble of thinking, oh, there's no risk? Let me just quickly say this. I had a bunch of people under what looked like jihadi accounts on the weekend come after me, making death threats and all kinds of shit. It happens on a daily basis. But this one person was saying that we were full of shit in the 9/11 2.0 thing. And my response was, anybody who thinks that we could open our border for 4 years, let millions of people across the border who hate our guts and think that there's going to be no repercussions from that, you're high. You're a total mess. But anyway, again, the question for you, Randy, how should everyday people try and push their government officials, representatives, civil servants, the whole 9 yards, to try and improve our defenses?
Well, I would hope that the old adage would still work, right? It seemed to maybe with the Cracker Barrel, right? But
Guilt.
Call them, email them, send them letters, overwhelm their office with contacts, telling them how unhappy with this you are. But I don't know if that's going to work today, right? I truly believe at this point, we need to go up on the hill. We need to go through every one of their records, their financial records and all their other communications, and find out which one of those people are stealing taxpayer dollars, which ones of them are committing treasons or any other crimes, and then we hold them accountable for whatever those said crimes are. And then the ones we find that didn't do any of that stuff, they get to keep their job, and we replace all the rest of them. I honestly think until we do that in term limits and we get half these critters, 75% of them out of office, nothing's going to change, because people have mentioned it before. There's 525 or something like that right up on the hill. And if they didn't want, and certainly Congress, right? If they didn't want things to be going this way, they would not be going this way. It's a fact.
Okay. So last question on this topic for you tonight. Then I've got one more for Jeff. Let's just assume, and rightfully so, that there's not much we can do with regards to government officials. What are the best ways that communities can try to team up and basically pay more attention to what's going on in their community, their spot, and inside of a county, and try to spot these threats before they blow? And then what can they also do to help defend their neighborhoods a little bit better? We've touched on that recently a couple times. Just give our audience a refresher on your thoughts.
Well, I think that, people need to, including myself, I'm just as bad as everybody else. And I think a lot of us are. How active are you in your actual community and your local government, and what's going on, the school board, who's on there going to those elections? I think that people go to the national elections, certainly to elect the president, but we just recently had an election here, and I think the guy that's over our little neighborhood, which we have 3,500 homes here. Okay. And I was thinking, he said something around there's over 6,000 registered voters in the neighborhood, but less than 1,000 came out to vote in the local elections. And that is what is affecting your local area. Both the school board and your local officials are where that's where you live. All this other stuff is national. And as we know, when we elect a president or not, it does affect you, but not as much as it does with your local governments and what your local officials are doing, because that's right there in your own backyard. If people just got more, involved in that, then we probably should resurrect the old adage of having a neighborhood, because as we mentioned over the last year on this thing, many people don't even know who their neighbors are anymore. True and story. Furthermore, don't even care. If you want to go out and try to make a group, people look at you like you're funny because you're trying to build your little support group that you may need when all this stuff happens. And so I think those are getting more active in those areas might help that situation.
When we walk our dogs, Randy, everybody in our neighborhood waves to us. We wave at them, except if I wear the Make America Pray Again hat that Donald Trump gave us all on my last trip to Mar-a-Lago, there's always a couple people who will not wave because they see that red hat. Thankfully, we're mostly, real Americans. TM, Randy Nance, by the way, he's got a trademark, real Americans. Most of them here are, but man, we've got some.
Well, that's the problem. We've also allowed them to get away with that. It's what we come back to all the time. Your liberals just don't want to face reality or the truth. And the fact that now you have people that are going to write you off because you have that red hat and they're not going to wave when they normally do, it just tells you how petty it's gotten and how small.
It's bad stuff. Jeff, last question tonight goes to you. In your estimation, just because you were in Afghanistan, you know what went down there, the disastrous, pull out of Afghanistan, how much of a role do you think that's going to play or is already playing around the world as far as those weapons ending up in our enemies' hands are concerned? The 7 billion, not the 84 billion in all the equipment, but the 7 billion in small arms.
Yeah, it's a huge deal because it's just basically pouring fuel on the fire. Here you've got, all these terrorist groups with access to the best weapons that we have. But as bad as that, I think there's another impact was that it made us look weak. Sure. And these guys, that's like there's blood in the water and they're sharks. And now they think, hey, we just hold out and they'll go away. And
ain't happening.
And they'll do it in such a way that they'll leave us all their equipment and all their money.
Yeah, I appreciate your closing thoughts on that. So basically, at the end of the day, there's not much question. China is embedded in our infrastructure, supply chains, technology networks, and they've got the ability to supplement the context coordinated attacks on multiple American cities carried out, in the field by the jihadis. We've been sold out. Our country's been sold out. Call it the money kings. Started selling us out to Beijing decades ago, as Randy pointed out, and they continue to do so to this day. I mean, the Mitt Romneys of the world are the scumbags who let this happen and line their pockets in the process.
Well, one thing I forgot, just so we don't mention, the other thing we need to bring back in is God back into all our lives, back into the public, into school. Now, I know there's still a separation of government power and the religious power, but that doesn't mean we can't bring God back, because if you notice, all this has happened since we've kicked him out more and more and more. That's really what's led us to this point and why things have gotten that small and petty. Why we can't just agree to disagree, or, hey, your guy won this time. We're going to still support him these 4 years and we'll see what happens next time. Now it's literally, we're not going to support you.
I would argue that up until the political correct movement, that American values were synonymous with Christian values. But by removing God and Christianity from American culture, that has fueled this alternate batch of Americans, nutcases with purple, blue, pink hair, who have less than zero values because they've never been exposed to it. They didn't say the Lord's Prayer in school in the morning. They didn't go to church. They didn't go to Sunday school. They weren't raised with good values. And at the end of the day, even people who are agnostic, atheists, etc. in the past, they still espoused the same Christian values that the rest of real Americans, TM, Randy Nance, have had, especially, Gen X. So anyway, at the end of the day, to stitch this together, and I know JP is going to get crack up with this one, but I'm telling you, you got to build redundancy into your preparedness. You got to have ways of generating alternate power, whether it's a generator, solar panels, whatever the case may be. You have to have the ability to make water safe to drink. You've got to have food stored up, and nothing is better than our friends at Carnival. And I'll speak a little bit more on that in a second here. You've got to have extra bits and pieces for communications. That this is not something where you go and you see, oh, look, Baofeng says on Amazon that this radio that's $30, $25, whatever, has a 35-mile range. And they go buy a couple, they get home, half the people don't even turn them on. They put them in a drawer and they think, if the shit hits the fan, I'll just go to the radios. Not realizing that those HT, those handsets are good for a mile, mile and a half in an urban environment. And they don't do what they think they do. And when they can't look up how to use them on the internet, they're completely toast. So you've got to actually learn the stuff as well. And at the end of the day, there's all kinds of things that you can do. You can use VPNs. You can use private mode in your browsers. You can keep extra stuff stored in Faraday bags. Offgrid.co is my favorite, bar none. They make the most badass Faraday bag stuff out there. But there's lots of pieces of the puzzle. That's what I refer to as the learning piece. And we cover it frequently. John Wheaton's videos, JJ Morris's videos, some of my videos with Dr. Mike kind of fall under that category. So with all of that being said, that's the end of our main topic. But this is like one of my favorite times of the night. 3, 2, 1. All right, so we're into the Carnival hero of the day. In Lebanon, Virginia, brave 8-year-old Bryson Kleeman tearfully sold his cherished Pokemon cards to raise $700 for his gravely ill puppy, Bruce. His selfless love touched the world, sparking donations over $17,000 that saved Bruce's life and inspired countless acts of kindness for pets in need. That's the Carnival hero of the night. That's the kind of values that we need to instill in our youngins. And what a fantastic story. Y'all know that I love dogs and I love people who treat dogs right. But I don't know, Jeff, Randy, if you have anything to say on this, but what a great life lesson for this young man.
Yeah, great job, kid.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. That's what really matters.
Big time. Big. So on Sunday nights, by the way, on the Sea Heaven show, it's like the old Chapter 3 from Survival Dispatch News. I cover the retard of the day, right? And we don't usually do it through the week here over on SDN. That's like seaheaven.substack.com. So letter C, HEAVN at substack.com. However, tonight's reader submitted story, I think could actually double as the reader submitted story of the day plus the retard of the day. So a local news report on SNAP EBT benefits being cut starts out with an interview of a 38-year-old healthy, unemployed single man with no kids who's devastated that he will now be forced to pay for his own food, stating it's some bullshit. This is what America has devolved into. This is not normal or sustainable. Planned accordingly. I'm not even going to play it. I don't want to play the video. It just pisses me off. It makes my blood boil worse than ever. But what on earth has happened to our society where people's expectations are, I don't have to work. Everybody else who's working, they can pay my way. That's not what America was founded on. And there's a big difference between a hand up and a handout. Let me get Randy on this stage for the wrap up. Jeff, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but that just kills me.
These are the people that need to be just kicked off immediately, unceremoniously. Just say, yeah, your money's gone.
It makes me shake my head. I don't know, Randy, if you have anything to say or not. I know.
Well, we're just all tired of the sense of entitlement, right? Like we owe them something, and not just, the guys like him, which we've seen. There's been plenty of videos, right? The first one came out was like, now what? How am I going to feed my kids? Your taxpayers are supposed to pay for my kids' food. Thinking I don't know whoever gave them that idea, but here's reality. What if the government did go broke? Then what are you going to do? That
was the one, Randy, where that
guy was a grown ass man. I mean, no business.
No, but the other one is, that the black girl says, I have 7 different baby daddies and none of them work for me. The American people owe me food for, for SNAP for kids and stuff. Yeah, way out there. All right, conflicted question of the night. The government's backup plan was blindsided with destruction and reserve supplies were compromised. Your country was never a net producer of goods, and now your fiat currency is worthless. If you were the president in this situation, how would you get other countries to cooperate with you? Jeff, I'll go to you first.
Well, if you don't have goods, you got services. So you look at trading some sort of service instead of trading goods.
Good answer. My mind just went into the gutter when you said that, but I won't expand on that. So give me an example of services that a country could offer another country other than press one for English.
Well, I mean, if you have doctors, you could contract out medical services. You could contract out technical expertise, all that kind of thing. You look at all the stuff that we outsource. You just look at what you can outsource.
Fair enough. Randy?
Well, I'm with Jeff because I don't know, if you don't have any products, I mean, I don't know what you're going to do, right? If you don't have any goods, you're going to have a hard time convincing other countries to come help you out. Because again, the same old adage, everybody wants something, right? You're not going to get something for nothing unless somebody owes you. So maybe you've got some outstanding debts that you might be able to call upon, but otherwise you're going to have to rent out your services. And so, as Shannon already mentioned, it could be even your military. That'd be one service. We do it all the time.
Interesting. Yeah.
But if they're broke or they have no goods, probably don't have a good military either. But
yeah, well,
this is just a question. So
yeah, that's why I said at the beginning this was a pretty easy question to answer as an American. With the amount of military might that we've got, I'm pretty sure other countries would cooperate with us because of that. But that's the end of everything we have to cover tonight, except for my friends over at Carnivalt, carnivalt.com. Use the code EATMEAT to get 10% off. They have subscriptions now too, by the way, which is a great way to protect yourself against pricing volatility. Beef pricing is continuing to go up. Chicken prices are going up, not because there's a reduction in supply, but because people are getting greedy, because they notice a trend of people saying, well, I can't afford the beef, so I'll go to the chicken, and it increased the price of chicken, and just because they can. But Carnival, 100% American. That bag I just showed you, made in America. The O2 absorber, made in America. The meat, all 100% American ranchers and farmers. No mRNA, no histamines, no antibiotics. True whole food. This bag here, 6 ounces. So if you're going hiking, fishing, hunting, or whatever, it reconstitutes to 1.5 pounds. So it's a fraction of the weight when you have it freeze dried, and then you reconstitute it 5 to 10 minutes with whatever, plus a little bit of salt or a bouillon cube, something like that. It's an incredibly convenient, but it doesn't require any refrigeration with a 25-year shelf life. You can stack it up, and whether it's 9/11 2.0 or Hurricane or something else, it's a good way to stay prepped up. They have single serving packets now as well, so you can kind of grab and go with those depending on what your outdoor activities are, or even take it to work with you. But that's it. Khalid is scheduled to be back tomorrow night with the Command 11 sit rep. On the off chance that he's not, I'll come up with a plan B. But as it stands right now, Khalid with the sit rep tomorrow night. The rest of us will be back on Wednesday night with the next episode in our long war series, which is going to look at the Israeli-Iranian conflagration, for lack of a better term. And then Thursday, I think what I'm going to do is we're having dinner at our son's. I'll probably do a special episode at 12 noon on Thursday, and it'll probably just be me. I'm not going to ask anybody else to work on Thanksgiving, and then we'll resume things per normal on Black Friday. But between now and then, if you could please like, share, comment, subscribe, I would appreciate it very much. God bless America.
God bless America.
Enjoy the closing video.
Rejoice,